is a sufficient basis for us to approve it. What I don't think that model has addressed is there fracturing in the reservoir that's going to leave bypassed oil when they start water flooding? Is the water going to just flow through fractures and start showing up at producing wells? So, and I don't think that question's really been answered to my satisfaction. I don't think it's been evaluated. It's been brought up by the protestants that they think it's naturally fractured and that could have Darcy type permeability in the fractures, which would be of a magnitude so much greater than the rock where the oil is contained that it would bypass that oil. My concern is I don't know that there's a way to resolve that. That may be an issue that we will never know the answer to unless we initiate the water flood. My bigger concern is that I think there are going to be royalty owners who don't understand technically whether this will work or not. And they're relying on us, the Oil and Gas Commission, to tell them, oh yeah, this is going to work. We'll approve this. And so I feel like that's, that would be a little easier if I didn't have this question about the fractures. So I would feel much better having an answer about, or at least some more evaluation on the natural fractures in the rock and how do we resolve the uncertainty of whether water flooding is going to just channel through the fractures and leave bypassed oil and not have greater ultimate recovery. I don't think the reservoir simulation addresses that.
Okay, you geologists tell me, is it possible to come up with evidence to suggest one way or the other with high degree of certainty? I mean, can that be?
I don't know. All I can say is I have that concern. I'm still not convinced that couldn't be a plausible outcome.
Unless you try it.
Yeah, unless you
go try it.
So which leads to...
So a pilot would have been good. Yeah, a little test to inject fluids and look for response and offset well or something.
Yeah, maybe take that north well, the one that they think they can use as an injection well, and inject into it and see what kind of response you get. Potential pilot, which is a challenge because there's some investment in that. But what you brought up is sort of leads me to the other comment, and we touched on a number of times about the just and reasonable. And I was uncomfortable when I asked the question about, did you consider a two-phase formula? And I was left with, it was kind of, well, we thought about it, but for about 30 seconds. Maybe they put more thought into it or not. When you think about the issues for royalty owners, and particularly the Knutsons, and there is one of their bigger concerns is that they will lose value. The two-phase formula, which essentially says that we will guarantee you get 100% of the remaining primary, which is if you do nothing, that's what they're going to get out of their well, sort of insulates them from that risk and uncertainty associated with water flood.
How do you know what that is? If you
have a decline curve projection, and you have to go by it.
Yeah, they have the data.
You have the data. You have a Ryder-Scott report that says, here's the remaining primary from the existing wells. So we do a two-phase formula that says that pretty much, and their expert did a lot of work in Wyoming. I've done a lot of work in Nebraska. I cannot think of a single unit that I ever did that did not have a two-phase formula, and at least ensured that the royalty owners receive their share of remaining oil that could be recovered if you did nothing. So that, if we end up approving it, that's the next thing is we may have to take some more time and continue this on so that we can have them come back with the formula that is acceptable.
The problem with that is that they have to get 80% approval based on the formula that the commission approves.
Right.
And what I like about your suggestion is But the working interest owners percentage, people who are spending money, they're going to have 100% regardless of what the formula looks like. So they're affected, not adversely affected in any fashion. The royalty owners would be protected based on, you know, their share of the remaining primary recovery until that's recovered, and then you would move to a different percentage based on the rest of the oil that's recovered through secondary recovery. So their percentage might go, some could have, you know, zero. If they have no producing well, they're going to have a 0% recovery out of this unit until all the primaries recovered. And then they would kick into a portion of the secondary recovery.
And if it works, nice thing about that, if it works and you get a great recovery, you get to that remaining primary pretty fast. So then you revert to your secondary formula early on in the life of the water flood. You can move forward.
Pretty fast is 3 days or
Well, think about geologic time and then so pretty fast would be, based on response. I mean, this is a dead oil system. If it works and it's relatively homogeneous, when they start putting water in the ground, you're going to see response within 3 months. Fairly typical, 3 to 4 months, you'll start to see response from this thing. So you could get to your remaining primary and switch over within 12 to 24 months.
Okay,
So that's kind of my concern.
right. Commissioner Holton, Randall, Howard, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mayor. First, I want to thank the parties for very clear, illustrative, and relevant testimony. I think, I feel like I just binge watched Game of Thrones in a couple seasons of it. I haven't done that yet, so don't tell me. And I really want to thank my fellow commissioners for their insightful questions. I think that's why we've got this diversity of commissioners on here, is we all bring our different expertise, and that's been very helpful. But we've heard very convincing, plausible interpretations of data that are in conflict with each other. And I really don't see a way of resolving it except through time. Either we do something and it works, or it doesn't work, and then we know. Or we don't do something and either everyone still gets to produce their oil, or the whole field gets gummed up and it's left in place. So doing something or not doing something doesn't guarantee primary production one way or the other. So I'm really still in a quandary. I'm leaning towards approving this proposal, but there are a few options that my fellow commissioners have brought up and suggested that I think if we incorporated that into the proposal, that might make it much easier to support. Thank you.
Rich brought up something that I had thought about. Early on, we were talking about a concern that a water flood might destroy the formation, might make it, it almost looks like if you don't do a water flood, you have some potential, if it continues to gum things up, to
You're right. I think there's a material risk that, they have shown from the evidence that they saw a temperature increase and a change in TDS, which means I think you've got a leaky fault and there may be some water coming from somewhere else. My concern, if you continue to deplete the reservoir, that potentially makes it worse. So the need to put some pressure maintenance in there does make sense. It's just, I'm not comfortable with what they propose is going to work, and that it's, then you get to that just and reasonable piece next.
Never heard you talk all day.
Come on.
Thank you. So, I'll just say I look at the two-part test and I can be convinced that unitization is reasonably necessary to ultimate recovery, and that the value of the increased recovery is greater than the cost of doing so. I can also be convinced, because I trust my fellow commissioners to look at it more critically than I'm able to. And so I am very interested in the questions and concerns that Commissioners Hawkins and Benton are raising on this. And so I guess I'm anxiously awaiting more of their remarks before I were to cast a vote. Just because these are, highly technical issues, and you all have more experience in dealing with them than I do.
So if we approve this now, they've got 6 months to get their 80%, but they've got to come back in for another hearing.
Yes.
So they've got time to flesh a lot of this stuff out.
It won't be on the percentage of the.
So, and here's the dilemma. If we approve it, and you, as Commissioner Hawkins brought up, then there may be a couple of royalty owners who got out there that are somewhat not completely informed and say, okay, I'll approve this. This must be great, I'll sign up. Then you have this one that we're not supposed to think about who said, wait, I didn't get enough information. That could be the deciding factor in getting to the 80%. So I struggle with, is there a way that we can somehow address that without, I don't want to stray in any legal spot, because legally we're not allowed to think about that. But is there a way that you could say, okay, we approve the unit, but we don't approve the formula?
Yes.
And that you have to go back and work with the royalty owners until you get a formula that they're all willing to accept.
AG said that you could do that.
So it is a two-step process whereby you make those initial determinations that the petitioners have set forth. But you also still, have your overriding duty to protect correlative rights and all those kinds of things. Those don't just disappear. And then once you decide that they've made those two showings, they still have to come in and make a showing with the 80%. So in my reading of the statute, there's nothing to prevent you from collapsing those two and doing them at the same time. But if you don't feel like you have sufficient information to make those initial two findings, that is a different issue than whether or not there's 80%. And if you want additional information developed to make you comfortable with those two findings, then you shouldn't be approving the plan.
Which is, as Commissioner Hawkins said, that's a bit of a gray area. I think I'd feel a lot more comfortable if they'd walked in here with an injectivity test on that north well that is below the oil water contact and never been produced. It says, yes, it can take 500 barrels a day or 700 barrels a day. But is that something, can we compel them to say, go do that and come back? I don't know if we can say you have to go spend money just.
I think you can indicate which part of these two findings you feel you don't have sufficient information to be comfortable with, and then they can go and do whatever they want to do to come back and present to you the additional information.
It is a standing well. It's not producing anything today. So I'm uncomfortable with the second part, the value exceeding the evidence, the investment.
So that's your decision, but it's not like you would be ordering to find the information. You would tell them what you think is lacking, and they would have the opportunity to complete, the record at a later time.
The only other point, I guess, is that if we do include this stipulation that after 2 years from the date of first injection, take a look at what the response to the water flood has been versus the cost, and you can unwind it. I'm not sure what kind of state the reservoir would be in at that point, but there is a way to at least unwind the unit if we had to.
It's a very good point. Forgot about that. That does.
It gives you a little bit of, you'll have an opportunity to see whether it's working, and if it's not working within 2 years.
I mean, technically, I don't think the risk of injection, other than channeling, which you brought out, fracturing, you're going to get that anyway. There are some technologies out there that potentially can repair that and make adjustments to that. So perhaps we go that way. If you say we approve the unit
With the stipulation
that they bring back a formula that is just and reasonable.
something that protects the correlative rights of the current producing wells until
So and that
it's recovered.
may get them to that 80% without having to enforce the contract.
So I'm hearing you say, sir,
I did not want to cut you off mid-sentence.
what- you didn't, but
I
counsel
did.
did. She said in her own polite way, shut up.
I did confer with Ms. Spall to confirm what I believe to be true, which is that you absolutely have the latitude to do what Commissioner Benton, I think, was just suggesting, which is that there's an approval that's contingent on two things, 80% and this different payout structure that you posited that I think SAT would get you to your comfort level with just and reasonable. I think that is within your scope of authority to say our approval of the unit, I'll just say again what I already said, is contingent on two things, 80% and the two-tier payout structure. So to what extent you articulate that two-tier payout structure, you can talk about amongst yourselves and perhaps with the parties.
We're going to specify the two-tier or two-phase as opposed to, we're not comfortable with the allocation. They can be created.
Yes. That would be my preference. So I'm concerned about protecting the correlative rights of the existing royalty owners. Very. I think that you said this stipulation so we could actually try this in a form of a motion.
And don't forget, you still have to make this known.
So I'll try it. If you don't like it, you can
Or you could just,
We
make
can always
friendly
amend
amendments.
it.
Yeah. So that we move that we approve the application subject to the stipulations between MBA Arkansas and Nighthawk Production, subject to the 80% approval, and subject to them bringing us a just and reasonable formula that protects the correlative rights of the existing royalty interests in the existing producing wells.
So on the royalty payment deal would coincide with the 6-month percent deal?
and you'll have one hearing.
I could second that.
Thank you.
Do we need to just not say that we want a two-phase formula, the first phase based on primary recovery and then the second phase based on secondary recovery?
I'm fine with that if you want to add that
I
in.
think that clarifies a little bit of what we expect them. they can still bring something back to us that reflects that.
Sure.
I guess if I could ask Commissioner Benton, do you want that in the order, or it's been strongly encouraged that that's what something along those lines that other participants agree is equitable? They may be able to come up with something even more creative, or do you really think that's the most likely just equitable?
A two-phase formula is easy to create. I mean, you can try to go for single phase and tinker with estimated ultimate recovery, you know, how many dogs he's got in his front yard, you know, all sorts of different things you can come up with. But when it gets, I've struggled with this a number of times with units, and at the end of the day, it says I'm going to do a phase one, which essentially more or less is a combination of surface acres and remaining primary or something like that, to where the royalty owners get compensated for the remaining primary production. It says, if I did nothing, you would get this. And then if I go and do something, then that second phase can focus more on, and it was brought up, I think, by counsel for the,
Running clocks.
yes, the protestant. Sorry, I'm getting old, sorry. That deals more with the secondary part and says there's value for secondary. And that some of the engineering logic for me is that there was a lot of discussion around how much you're going to get for contribution from the existing water influx and how you balance that out and how you repressure that. So I think it should be in there. And sorry for babbling on, but I think I would like to say that it's a two-phase formula which the phase one adequately compensates the existing royalty owners for the existing estimated remaining recoverable reserves prior to initiating the secondary recovery operation. And the second phase compensates the working interest owners and the royalty owners for the value added from the water flood project. There's a little more skin in the game for Nighthawk to do it that way, because they're saying, I'm going to make this investment based on what I'm going to get from the secondary project. I'm going to take that risk. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Who's going to get to put that into less than 50 words?
Ms. Bach?
I'm working on it. Do you want me to read you what I have, or
Sure.
Say it again?
do you want me to read you what I have?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion to approve the application subject to the stipulation between Nighthawk and MBA, subject to 80% approval from royalty interest owners, and subject to a just and fair allocation, including a two-phase formula, phase one of which compensates the current royalty owners, and phase two which compensates royalty owners based on secondary recovery. I think I might need some additional language on phase one to help me with.
Phase one, you might put under the remaining primary recovery.
Under estimated, justly compensates them for the estimated remaining primary recovery.
So estimated primary remaining recovery.
Estimated remaining primary recovery.
Remaining goes first.
Yeah.
Under, okay. So
And
now
my
I
only
have,
concern is fairly specific, as opposed to just saying they need to come up with a fair, equitable, just allocation method, which gives them more leeway for creativity.
Okay.
I'm just asking. I'm not.
I'm okay with either one. Actually, if we want to be specific, sort of spells it out. But if they would like to have a little bit more latitude, I'll defer to.
Well, or whatever the other commissioners feel like.
Yeah.
on that.
I'm okay with specificity.
Okay.
I'm just talking off the top of my head. Any other comments? let's see, we have a motion. We have a second that most everyone, Director.
So procedural clarification. Under the statute, it says this 80% and this other contingency no more than 6 months. So I think if the parties can get to those two conditions in less than 6 months, they're welcome to come back prior to 6 months. And for everybody's benefit, there are 6 commissioners here today who have heard all of this testimony. 2 of those 6 will not be on the commission after June 30th. So there might incent you to want to get it done by June hearing.
Of course, in the past, we have made the public record available to commissioners that weren't here. They certify it, that they've read it, and they're still eligible to participate.
That option is there, Mr. Chairman, and I will be sure they know it was your suggestion. That
They read that public record. Will still.
Just about councils.
I was going to say, I also think that they sort of bifurcated the determination. So even if some of these commissioners are not available the next time this comes up, I think that the new commissioners could look at the part that you are presenting separately, because it just concerns, you know, the just and reasonable part and the 80%, and don't necessarily, you know, have to go all the way back to the beginning.
That's new ground to plow, in a sense.
I'm sure they'll be more wise and informed.
Yeah, I hope they are. All right, we have a motion. Ms. Bachfield, pretty confident she has it recorded. All right, that takes care of everything. If there is one other item to
Just
discuss.
to contemplate, because I don't want you to feel like we tried to railroad you into this. That there, you know, the downside to a two-phase formula is that you have to wait. And, you know, the formula doesn't change until you get all that primary recovery. So there's a downside to that. And that, you know, the person who's making the investment and some of the participants, particularly if they're working interest owners, you know, they may not share equally. The benefit you have here is you have one working interest owner. So it really doesn't matter to them. Just wanted to make you aware of that, is that there may be other times when we have units come up and you'll be retired. So we may not want to do that.
Well, I feel good that that formula will protect relative rights for all the royalty owners and the working interest owners. So I think that's a good recommendation.
All right. Call for the question.
Question has been called. And
Did we get a second?
Yes,
We did.
We did.
you want to know who it was?
Commissioner Allwood.
Do you commit the motion one more time to be sure?
Probably wouldn't hurt to do
Okay.
that, just so.
I just want more talking time. Just kidding. Okay. Commissioner Benton moved to approve the application subject to the stipulation between Nighthawk and MBA, subject to 80% approval from royalty interest owners, and subject to a just and fair allocation, including a two-phased formula, phase one of which compensates royalty interest owners under estimated remaining primary recovery, and phase two, which compensates royalty interest owners based on secondary recovery.
Fair enough.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That request for unitization has been approved with some minor stipulations. Thank you all very much. And by the way, I did want to make a quick comment. Some of you alluded to this. One of the things I have noticed serving on this commission for whatever, 8, 9 years, is that these folks come prepared. They do their homework. I am so proud of them, and it's been an honor to serve because of it. Thank you for noticing.
Thank you so much to the commission for your time and to staff as well.
without further ado, and then you're going to contact us about the Trinidad escapade. Adventure. Rich,
A little too much so.
I don't think there's any way I can make that. I'm going to try to call him. Change the reservation. If you want to go for it.
All right, I gotta bolt out of here.